All right, so let's start with your measurements. So this can be obviously like quite a tricky one, right? Because as women, we are so often told that we are like, you know, the worth of like what our weight is or what our measurements are or whatever. So it can be like quite a difficult thing. But obviously the massive benefit we have as sewists is that we can use this information to make clothes that fit us really well. So in a way, who cares if your waist is 38 inches or 55 inches if you have a skirt that fits you and looks good, right? So this is the area where there's no point in sort of doing the mental thing where you're like, oh, maybe I can squeeze into a 16. I mean, that's something I did for so many years because in my brain, I thought it was unacceptable to be bigger than a 12 for a long time. So even when I was a 14 or 16, now I'm like easily an 18, I would squeeze into a 12. And of course, many things wrong with that. It didn't look great. It didn't feel good. There's no point in doing that when it comes to sewing. You want your actual measurements. And really, the way I like to think about it, it's a bit like a recipe, right? If a cake tells you you need a cup of flour, you're not like, oh, that's a lot. Maybe I'll do 3/4 of a cup. It's like, no, that's what is required to get a good result. And it's the same here. Like you need to know your accurate measurements in order to get a good result. If you find it really triggering to like do it, my tip is use the other measurement. Right? So if you're like, oh my goodness, it hurts me emotionally that I'm a 40-inch waist, like I'm really struggling with this, which I understand. I mean, I don't in that I don't care. I have a 40 to 42-inch waist. I don't care. But I understand that it can be tricky. I mean, I don't even know what the equivalent is. Let me have a look. I can't do this in pen. If you told me I had a 102 centimeter waist, I'd be like, okay, doesn't mean anything to me. As someone who's lived in 7 countries with different weighing measurements, I have to tell you, when I first moved to America and I found my weight in pounds, I was like, well, that feels like a meaningless number. It meant nothing to me. Whereas in stone in the UK, it mattered. So that's one thing if you're like struggling a little bit to think about it. So a couple of things before I show you how to measure. First one is you want to measure often. Most of us change size often. It's very, very common. And the number of times I've had someone say, I've done 7 muslins and it still isn't working. And I say, can you recheck your measurements? And they go, oh yeah, I'm 2 inches different than I thought it was. So taking your measurements is so fast. There's really no reason not to do it every time. I mean, if you're sewing every day, maybe not. But if you're sewing once a month, like just do it again. It's quick. Second thing is you need to wear the same underwear you're going to be wearing in your final garment, especially bras. Now, the reason is if you have big boobs, they're kind of malleable, right? Like people don't tend to have like rock solid big boobs. Maybe if you have breast implants, but I don't know. But most of us don't. Most of us just have big natural boobs. Well, I'm currently wearing a nursing bra, which basically is making my boobs triangular and low. If I was wearing a normal bra, they would literally be here. I mean, that is inches and inches of height difference. And also, to be perfectly honest, like, so the height difference, they're coming out here more, like the whole circumference of my boobs is different depending on what bra I have on. So especially for women with big boobs, if you're a B cup, it's going to be less of an issue. But if you're like D plus, it matters what bra you're wearing. So you need to wear it, the same type of bra you can wear with the garment. Ideally the exact same bra, but at the very least, you know, a sports bra is super different to a push-up bra. A foam, like no seam bra is very different to like a 3 or 4 seam bra in terms of how your boobs are going to be. I will say for high bust, it's even more important. So in this bra, which is just like, because it's a nursing bra, my high bust measurement is going to be fairly small. But if I have a bra where my boobs are up, it's going to add like inches to my high bust measurement. So again, you've got to be aware of this. If you wear shapewear, don't know how many people do anymore, but if you do, you need to have that on as well, because that's also going to affect your measurements. Shoes, it is a good idea to wear the shoes you're going to be wearing with the final garment. I don't think it's as critical, but it does affect things a bit. And then the other big tip, which most of you who have come to a workshop and know me well, is the sitting down thing. So how many of you have had something that fits you amazingly standing up, and then you sit down and suddenly your blood circulation is being cut off, you're spilling over it, it hurts, like it physically hurts. Before I learned to sew, most of my clothes hurt me when I sat down if they weren't elastic. The reason is we get bigger when we sit down. That's true for most women, but it's almost entirely true for plus size women. The most common places you get bigger are like your waist and your hip and your thigh. You don't really, you know, from here up, it's not really affected. And it's really important that you know those numbers, because if standing, your waist is like 40 inches, but sitting down, it's 44, and you make a woven pencil skirt for a 40-inch waist, as soon as you sit down, that extra 4 inches is just going to spill or be compressed, and it's going to be sore. Now, there's some caveats to this. So what you need to do is have both numbers, right? You need to know both numbers, your standing and your sitting, waist and your hip. If you're wearing something stretchy, you're probably fine with your standing measurements, because when you sit down, it stretches, as long as you're comfortable with that. First caveat. Second caveat, I have heard from some people who like to be compressed. Fine. If you want to be compressed, that's great. What the sitting down measurements is really important for is wovens, which, especially if they don't have much ease. Now, so you take something like the Upton dress, it matters a bit for the waist, although the waist is very high and it's probably above where most people expand a lot. But you do want to make sure that when you sit down in the Upton and you get a bit bigger at that point, that you're going to be able to still breathe and not feel like very uncomfortable. For the hip, it doesn't matter, because the Upton skirt is really big and there's like 10, 15 inches of additional fabric around you. So it doesn't matter. So you need to kind of critically apply this. You need to think, in this type of garment with this type of fabric, when I sit down, is it the kind of thing that's going to like pinch me? And if it is, you're going to need to use your sitting measurement. So really, it's just all information, right? It's not a strict rule. It's like looking at finished garment measurements. It's information that's going to help you pick the right size for you. Now, the big question people have, and it's a good one, is if I use my sitting down measurement, is it going to fit me when I'm standing up then? This is where you have like the compromise bit, right? If you're making a really, really like tight fitting pencil skirt, no. Basically, you're going to have to accept like some kind of averaging here, right? Like, so you're probably going to want to give yourself something to sit down, but you're not going to want to make it so big that it no longer fits you. But this is also something where you start thinking about styles, right? If something has a bit of elastic in it, a stretch woven is often a great substitute, because a stretch woven gives you like maybe 5 or 10% wiggle room, but still has the look of a woven. So there is a bit of style in there as well, but especially for patterns where the pattern is the same size as your body. So for instance, like the Upton, where the waist is not much bigger than your body is, you do need to know what your sitting down waist is. Okay? Does anyone have a question on what I've said so far? You can ask in the chat, or if you open the participants, you can put your hand up. You can put like a little green hand up to tell me that you have a question if you want to ask it on the video. Any questions? Emily asked, what do you do if you regularly wear different bras? So you need to decide basically what kind of bra are you going to wear this garment with. Now, if your boobs don't radically change size with the garment, that's fine. And if you're making like a T-shirt, it doesn't matter that much, right? Because like it stretches. But if you're making like an Upton dress, that matters a lot, because where your boobs are is going to affect fitting like significantly. Any questions? I am not seeing any. It's hard to figure this out sometimes. Okay, cool. Well, in that case, I'm going to show you how to measure yourself. So, by the way, in my bedroom, where I brought some sewing machines home so that I could sew at home, but I have a 1-year-old, so that was a futile idea. Okay, so we're going to start with your bust measurement. So there's 2 measurements that you want to take. You want to take your high bust and your full bust. For the purposes of almost all patterns, your full bust is your bust, right? So if it just says bust, including Cashmerette, that's full bust. Usually there's another line that says high bust. So bust on like big 4 on almost all indie patterns means full bust. Full bust is the biggest bit of your bust. As if you walked into a wall, what hit the wall first? Which is also your apex, right? Is the bit of the wall you would hit first. You often see in sewing books that that's your nipple, but it might not be, right? Because actually, if you have enormous boobs, then they might be somewhere else. I'm not sure mine are right there right now. I could check. Maybe you don't want to see that. But like, you just want whatever the furthest point is. Your nipples might be here. They might be here. I don't know. But this is the point of full bust. So ideally, you want to do this in front of a mirror. And I'm going to change my screen so I can see myself a bit bigger. Oh, hold on. Why am I not seeing myself? Spotlight video. Here we go. So full bust. I'm going to take the measuring tape. And ideally, I'd be in my underwear, but there's only so much I want to show you guys. Today is not the nudie cam day. So let's bring it around the back of you. And you want to have a mirror. I'm using the Zoom thing. And sometimes you have to work on it a little bit. And you want to make sure it's parallel. So actually, this T-shirt is like perfect, right? Because I can just follow the lines. Okay, so there we go. And you want to relax and, you know, have it firm. So 50.5. So my boobs are usually 48, but I'm breastfeeding, so they're 50.5. So 50.5. So that's your full bust. For your high bust, you have to put it under your armpits diagonally and over the top here. Okay? And you want to put your arms down again. Okay? And I am 45 there. So as you can see right now, I have like a 6-inch, 7-inch difference. I love that some of you are doing it at home. That's great. 6 or 7-inch difference. That's your high bust. Your under bust, which is used for bras, is under here. But for sewing, it's almost always your high bust up here that you use. So the reason we tend to take high bust is because it's used when you do an FBA. So I'm not going to go into that this week, but we might do like a whole web chat on FBAs because I think people would be interested. But you're going to use that high bust. A common misconception is like, what does that mean? High bust is basically a cheat to imagine what your bust would be if you were a B cup. Okay, that's what it is. It's an estimate for if you had a B cup. Now you can see that it's a little bit tricky because if you have really high up boobs or low down boobs, you're going to get a different number here, or depending on what bra you're wearing, right? Sorry, you have to watch me holding my boobs a lot today. They're like public property now. So that's what it's doing. It's estimating, what if I had B cup boobs? And then an FBA is saying, but I don't. I have all of this extra and we're adding the extra in here. So this is the like fake B cup. Okay, waist. So we talked about this last week as well. The whole question of like where your waist is like a big one because most of us do not go like this. You might, great, but most of us don't. So if I look at my side, so this is kind of interesting, right? So I'm going to show you like, okay, we got the roll here. So like, where is my waist on that, right? Like, it's not obvious. I definitely don't go in. This is the like narrowest bit of me, actually, like right in my bra. And then I kind of just go out. So there we go. You can just see it. So I've got like bumps, like what, you know, what's my waist here? And people say like, oh, it's where you bend to the side. What? I just have a fat roll here, right? Like, I don't know. What's that meant to be? And Carrie is actually sharing right now the blog post where I go into this. So the short answer is your waist is wherever you want it. For plus size women, it tends to be higher. My personal theory is that when we have more fat, we tend to put it on like in our torso and it almost like fills us up, right? Like you might put it more on your hips or your waist. I'm very much a waist person. But what it means is that this part here often ends up being the narrowest part. Also, if you have big boobs, they take up a lot of your body. So if I had small boobs, they wouldn't be down here, right? I wouldn't have small boobs here. That would be, well, I mean, I might, but it's unlikely. My small boobs would be like here. So what that means is the distance between my boobs and my waist is tiny, right? Now, traditionally, people were told that their waist was where their tummy button was, okay? Belly button. So here's my belly button. Enjoy the scars. So this would be, according to like a lot of books, my waist. That is radically too low. And also, honestly, just doesn't look great proportionately. So what we tend to do is put waist around here. So it's not quite empire line because that would be here. But what you can see is if I pull the thing there, I basically start to look more like I have a defined waist, because you're seeing the line come in from my boob here, and then my hips are starting to go out here. And for me, that's what, like 2 inches, 2.5 inches below my bra. And what I tend to say, so my belly button's here, my bra is here, so it's about halfway. That's where I tend to pick. But again, the whole point is that you can actually pick where you want. Now, if you're very apple-y shape, you may think like, well, I have to go for like, you know, where the waist is meant to be, but that's actually the biggest bit of you. But again, I mean, anyone can look however they want. But if you want to give the appearance that your waist is smaller than your hips and your bust, often this spot is about where to do it. And that is basically why Cashmerette patterns are there. So you can see if we put it there, what I look like. And then you can see if I put it there, what I look like. Much more blocky and rectangular. But if I put it up here, it's more obvious if I was wearing something flowy, but there we go. But if you look it up here, it looks more proportionate for some reason. I mean, I'm not entirely sure of like the geometry theory, but it does. So this is where I'm going to measure. And it's also where most Cashmerette patterns are. So what's that right now? 41 inches. So now I'm going to sit down. So the way I'm going to do this is, move my chair this way. I'm going to keep a hold of it loosely, and I'm just going to sit down and let it spread. Okay. That is now 44.5 inches. That is the difference, right? So what I now know is when I sit down, if something isn't stretchy, it needs to be able to go to 44.5 inches. Otherwise, it's going to be going much tighter when I sit down, right? So that's how that works. Now for hip, I have proportionately smaller hips, so, and very straight hips. What you want to do is you want to go around the biggest bit of your bum. I also have very little bum. Round over here. So for me, where are we? 46.5. And now I'm going to sit down holding it. There we go. And now I am 50. So again, got much bigger there. Now I have seen people say that you should account for your stomach. So basically, as if your hip measurement comes out to this point. Now, if you're making like a pencil skirt sloper, that makes a lot of sense. But if you think about it, if I was making these jeans and I used that measurement, it would assume that my trousers were out here, my legs were out here, and that actually wouldn't work so well. So, KK Mackenzie is laughing and saying that she has the same shape as me. So first of all, good news. It means you're probably fitting Cashmerette patterns quite well. But to be fair, actually, I shouldn't say that. We don't actually base everything on my shape, but everything always ends up looking on my shape, good on my shape, if you see what I mean. But the great thing about that is grading between sizes, which we're going to get to in a minute. Okay, so that's the main measurements. Now, there's one more that I think is really good to have, and that's your bicep. Now, this is harder to do yourself, but this is how I do it. So go around your bicep. Again, I'm like very much like a potato on toothpicks. So I have like slender arms and legs compared to my torso. Okay, so I'm 13.5. So with this, the key thing is your arms need to be down because they get bigger when you go down. They sort of expand a bit. And also, if you have like really big muscles, I don't, you want to, you know, do that and also make sure you're flexing them so that you're getting like the full extent of your bicep. Most plus size women don't tend to put down much fat in their forearms or their calves, but if you do, it's worth measuring there as well. And then with your thigh, it's a very similar thing, and you'll want to do sitting and standing. So I don't tend to do this one because things are almost always baggy on me. But again, I tend to do it at like your crotch level, basically. So 26, and I sit down and I'm 28. So again, I have like fairly small thighs, so I don't spread much. But for some women, you know, you might easily put 4, 5, 6 inches on there. which is totally fine, right? We're just learning what we need to learn in order to get the fit that we want. Now, there are some people who will take like dozens and dozens and dozens of measurements, right? Because there's all kinds of things you can do. You can do this, 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 this. If you want to go about sewing in that way, you absolutely can. Like, it's kind of one school of how you fit. Personally, I prefer to do like the key points and then to make a muslin. And I find that that usually helps me. But if you are doing a sloper, you need to take many, many points. You do typically need someone to help you with that because it involves a lot of points across your back, and you may not know that. One thing that can be helpful on torso lengths is to figure out how long you are from like the shoulder to the waist. And you can then compare that to a pattern to kind of do a quick check. Okay, how do you measure hips if you have a bubble butt? You do it around the biggest bit of your bum. So again, it's not a one-off, like do this one measurement, boom, everything's fine. You never have to worry about it again. It's like to get the starting point to do your muslin, but you may then have to make changes. Okay, Lilia is asking so torso measurement. Okay, so often it's quite useful actually to do your back torso length, because that often gives you the right bodice length. And then on the front, if you're having to do an FBA, obviously here to here on me is much bigger than if I had a B cup, right? It would be like a much shorter length. So I would say use your back from your neck to your waist as the bodice length. Okay, so Becky's asking on vertical measurements, how do I know if where I want my waist is the same as on the pattern? So measuring it. So again, you can measure, you can make a muslin and see how it goes. With Cashmerette patterns, we often have high waists, and I encourage you to try that first. A lot of people are like, I never do high waists, and then they try and it works really well. And they're like, oh, I'm surprised. So I encourage you to do that. However, like if you already know that you have, say, a very long torso, very short torso, you can measure the pattern first. So what you're thinking about always, right, is that you're changing the pattern to fit your body. It's not changing your body to fit the pattern. So wherever you want the waist is where you want the waist. What you'll then do is alter the pattern itself. So on Cashmerette patterns, we have length and shorten lines on all the main pieces that you might want to do that. Some of the old ones are like missing some in some places, but now moving forward, like all of them have it. And then basically you can alter the length of the bodice or alter the length of the skirt to get the waist to the point that you want. If it's a really complicated pattern, that's a bit trickier. But, like if there's tons of panels or, it's one of these big 4 Vogue ones that are very intricate, it's a bit harder. But on almost all Cashmerette patterns is actually a pretty easy thing to do. I mentioned this last week and I'll mention it again. Just because you're taller or shorter than we draft for does not mean automatically that you have to change the bodice length. So we draft for 5'6" short-waisted, but we have people who are 5'2" who do not change the length of our stuff. We have a tester who's 5'10" who shortens, because it's all about your proportions, right? The 5'10" person has a short torso on long legs, my friend Dawn. But equally, she might have someone else could have a long torso and short legs. So you can't just go, oh, I'm 5'2", I'm going to take 4 inches out of all these patterns. Maybe your torso is exactly what we assume the torso is, and you just have shorter lengths. So that's why you really have to try something first. I told this last week, but I made a mini skirt for my mother accidentally because she's 5'2", and I thought, oh, I'll just reduce 4 inches off the hem. And that results in awkward Christmas mornings when your mother is insisting that she can wear it and it's totally fine. And she's in fact flashing her knickers at everybody. Gemma asked, what do you do about your hip measurement if you have a shelf from having a C-section? Do you go over it or under it? So it's about where you're wearing your clothes, right? So if you're wearing your clothes over it, then over it. If you're intending to wear this piece of clothing tucked under it, then under it. So this is, again, why it's quite good to take your measurements every time and to think about the pattern that you're making. I know right now, so I am not an expert in fitting on an apron tummy, although actually I've been researching it because I think it's a really, really common like fitting challenge, and I want to try and get better at helping people out with that. Like I have it a little bit, but not significantly, so it's not something I personally experienced. It's mostly a challenge on pants. It tends to be okay on other things. But yeah, so basically if you're wearing your jeans like over, then you know you would measure over. But if you prefer to, so I have a friend Andrea who's on the cover of the Fuller and the Turner dress, and she tends to wear her jeans under her tummy. Fine, so that's where she measures. All right, that's it. Okay, so Rita's asking, if you want to use your vertical measurements to make adjustments and the pattern doesn't mark the waist or the hip lines, what should you do? So there are some standards, although I don't think everyone follows them. But basically, again, here's the thing. There's no like magic, right, to where the waist or the hip is on a pattern. It's really just looking at it. If when you look at a pattern, and a Cashmerette one, this isn't going to happen, but someone else's pattern, it's really straight, it doesn't matter, right? Like you pick where the waist is. If you can see where it's really going in, well, there's the waist. If it has panels or it has a waistband, you can look at the photo as well and sort of ascertain where you think it is. The hip part, the easiest thing to do, if you were wondering, like, because you might have a much higher or much lower hip than like average, which is very common, right? Like hips come in like every single combo of shape and size and hip. Like I kind of do like this sort of square thing going on here, like a lovely boyfriend once pointed that out to me. Bastards. But you might, you know, some women have a more of a shelf hip, and some women like actually get bigger at the top of the thighs, right? That's common as well. So what I would do is I would mark the waist on the pattern. Like I said, like either you decide or you can tell where it is by like coming in or a waistband or looking at the photo on the front. Then I would measure yourself, the distance from your waist to your hip, right? So what you could do, I don't have this on me, but you could have elastic, right? So you'd be like, okay, here's my waist, and you would make that an elastic. And then you go, here's my hip, make that an elastic, like that. And then you would measure from here to here, from the waist elastic to the hip elastic, right? So you might say for the sake of argument, 15 inches maybe on me. I happen to know that like an old-fashioned standard is 8 inches, but it's ridiculous. Like one of the first things I did with my pattern drafter is said our hips are not 8 inches below our waist, because that just doesn't work for plus size women at least. So what you would then do is you'd measure on the pattern down 15 inches and then measure across at the hip level. And so now you're like, okay, that's the point of where the pattern is going to be for my hips. Then you can see, is that going to fit? Is that where you want it to be? And if it isn't where you want it to be, you can lengthen or shorten the pattern to get it to where you want it to be, right? So you've got to get out of thinking that there are these like absolute correct waist and hip placements. Ultimately, like you can choose where they are. You just have to change the pattern to hit the points. And I will say that that kind of torso length thing, that's usually pretty standardized, as in if you discover that like you have a particularly low hip compared to average based on patterns, that's probably going to apply to like most patterns. So you can kind of do that adjustment and figure it out. All right. Yes, someone just said, I should have mentioned this, that Minimalist Machinist on Instagram has I want to say it's called paniculus, but it doesn't sound right, does it? There's a word for it anyway, for an apron tummy. And she's been doing a lot of work on how to fit for that, especially on the jeans. Idoya asked, where are the Ames jeans meant to hit? At the belly band or higher, belly button or higher? Higher. So just a bit higher. So they should basically cover your belly button, but it's a difficult question because actually everyone's belly buttons are in a different place. So on me, and I'd say on most people, they come a bit above your belly button, but not on everybody, because again, how long is the distance from your belly button to your crotch, right? There can be huge variations. So it on average is there, but it depends on your specific question. Okay, I am going to move on now to how you pick your size. So I thought the easiest way to do this, or the best way to do this, would be to actually show you examples. And I'm going to show you an example using the fuller cardigan and also an example using the Concord. So, because they work in quite different ways. So I'm going to go to share my screen now, and hopefully this works. Hold on, desktop 1. Yeah, share. Hold on 1 second. I have to do something with system preferences. Dooby-dooby-doo. It's okay. Okay, all right, let's see if this works now. Great. Okay. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can see the Cashmerette website on the screen now? All right, thank you. So this is our shipping temporarily suspended website. So I want to show you where you can find the size charts, and then we're going to start talking about how they work. So basically every single pattern has size charts in it. So we're going to go and look at the fuller. It's my lovely friend Andrea. My internet is slow. Okay, so you're going to scroll down, and at the bottom of every one is here, says finished garment measurements, and it also has the body chart measurements in there as well. So you click it, and then here it comes. So there are basically two charts. They're in metric and imperial. There's the body measurements chart, and there's the finished garment measurements chart. So what I'm now going to do is show you, share screen, Illustrator. Here we go. Okay. So here is, so I did this because I can draw on it easily. There's probably a better way, but I'm not very sophisticated today. So this is the chart that I just showed you for the fuller cardigan, but I've just used inches for now, just because it's a little bit easier to navigate. So there are two charts. The first one, or tables. I always say charts. It's not right, is it? It's a table. Okay, tables. The first table is the body measurements. This should be what your body measures. So basically, it is exactly the same as the measurements that you are taking of your body. So if my waist is 40 inches, I look at here, and 40 inches waist is the size I'm meant to make, right? Now the body measurements is the same for every single pattern. So I know that I'm in 18GH, usually my boobs are bigger, but I'm basically an 18GH in Cashmerette, sometimes with a 20 waist. And we'll get on in a minute to why I'm only sometimes a 20 waist. But according to this body measurements, I'm 18, 20 waist. The finished garment measurements is the measurement of the garment that you're going to make. It's the piece of clothing. So if you take the actual cardigan and you measure the cardigan, how big is it? Now, the difference between the two is called ease. So the difference between how big the clothing is and how big your body is called ease. There are 3 different types of ease you can have. Positive ease is when the garment is bigger than your body. Okay, so an extreme of positive ease will be like a kaftan or a muumuu, or like, you know, like the Wilder gown, right, from Friday Pattern Company, something you can twirl around in. There's all kinds of fabric. You might have 48-inch hips. The skirt might be 70 inches, right? That's positive ease, much bigger than your body. Most woven patterns have positive ease. Some knit patterns have them. Then you can have like 0 ease. It's the same size as your body. So that is what you would expect, for instance, in a fitted woven pencil skirt, that it's exactly the same size. Now, if something's exactly the same size on your boobs, it means you're going to potentially have trouble breathing, which means that you're going to want to definitely be a bit generous when you're measuring yourself and be like, and take that rather than that number, because you need to allow yourself a little bit of breathing room. There are some like old-fashioned charts on like how much ease you need at each point, but honestly, they're usually like I mean, laughable. Like someone in one of my Australian workshops brought something she'd been shown, and I was like, if you do that, you will guarantee look like you're wearing like very old lady clothes. Now, if that's your style and what you want to wear, cool. But if it isn't, if you want to wear something that looks more contemporary, you know, we do not be needing like 3 inches, 4 inches of ease at the bust in like a t-shirt if you want a contemporary look. So the third type of ease is negative ease. Now, this is something we get emails about all the time. We get people going, Jenny, I don't mean to be rude, but there's a mistake on your charts for your new pattern because the finished garment measurements are smaller than the body measurements. So you might want to check that. That is not a mistake. That is deliberate. So what that means is it's when the garment stretches to meet your body, right? That's negative ease. So the garment is smaller than your body and it stretches. Now you might think, well, I don't ever want that, right? Like people immediately jump to like, I don't want to wear a leotard. Like I don't want super tight. But the reality is most knit garments have negative ease, even if you don't realize it, especially in ready to wear. So if you look at this t-shirt, I wouldn't say that this t-shirt is like horrifically tight. I mean, I guess you can see my back fat, but fine. It's not horrifically tight, but it is stretching just a bit to get a semi-decent fit through my boobs. It's not an amazing fit. We're not going to pretend it is, but like it's stretching just a bit here. And one thing that confuses people, freaks people out, is they say, oh my goodness, there's like 3 inches of negative ease in this pattern. And they think, well, that seems huge. But here's the thing, it's a percentage. So if you had 3 inches of ease on a tiny person at their bust, right, negative ease, it would be like a huge amount, right? Because if their body was only like 28 inches big and you had 3 inches of negative ease, that would be really tight. But if your body is like 60 inches big, 3 inches of negative ease isn't actually that much, right? Because it's a percentage, not an absolute number. So it might stretch like 5%. That might be 3 inches. Okay, so don't be too freaked out when you see what appears to be a large number of negative ease. Now, some people never want negative ease. That's okay, you know, totally fine. You can look at these charts and figure it out. But again, I encourage you initially to try it. One important thing to remember though, fabric really matters with this. If there's positive ease in a pattern, you can kind of use anything, right? So let's say you have like a woven dress and it's really floaty and it has lots of positive ease. And you say, I want to make it in a knit. You can do that. It might come up slightly big at the top. You might want to go down a size, but you can do that. However, let's say you want to make an Appleton dress, which is a knit fabric dress with negative ease, and you say, I want to use cotton. You cannot do that because it only fits because the fabric stretches. So it's not a two-way thing. Wovens can be made in knits. Knits cannot be made in wovens with very few exceptions. The only exceptions is if it's like a super floaty thing, you know, like some of the art to wear kind of tunics, maybe. But I will say when they're being drafted, knits, they take advantage of the fact that it's going to stretch, especially to get a good fit through here. And even if something was floaty and you made it in a woven, you're going to get these like massive folds here because the woven fabric like can't really deal with it. So let's go back to the chart. So this is the fuller cardigan. So let's just have a look at the kinds of ease that are here. So let's have a look at the size 32. So let's say you're a 32 CD cup, right? So you have a size 60. Oh, hold on, let me make that. You can see my live Illustrator shenanigans here. Okay, so let's say you're a 60 bust and you're a 52 waist and you're a 62 hip, right? You're all in one size, hooray. So let's look at the finished garment measurements. So the bust on the fuller is also 60. That means 0 ease. Now you might think, oh, Jenny, you just said like 0 ease at the bust is a bad idea. But 2 things. One, the fuller's in a knit, which has 50, and we say at least 15% stretch. So that's enough. Second of all, you have to think about the style. The fuller cardigan comes like this. So it's not actually all the way around your bust, right? It's here. So even if you wanted to breathe, like it has, because it has like this empty part here with the V of the cardigan. So it's actually fine. So this is what gives you like a nice kind of trim look. It's not tight, but it's also not like floaty. Now let's look at the waist. So we said our waist is 52. The waist on this is 60 and 5/8. Now this is where when I said I'm an 18, but sometimes I need a 20 waist, but sometimes I don't. This is where this comes in. If your waist, instead of 52 inches, was like 54 inches, you might think, oh no, I can't fit in this. But you could, because the waist actually is 8 and 5/8 inches bigger than your body. So this is where you can sometimes avoid grading between sizes by looking at the finished garment measurements. Now, if your waist was 60 inches, that would probably be taking it too far. The cardigan would suddenly look tight. You wouldn't be able to move around very much in it. However, somewhere like this, where you have like nearly 9 inches of difference, if your waist was like 3 inches bigger, 4 inches bigger, that would be totally fine. So this is one reason it's really good to look at these numbers. And sometimes when people ask us, what size should I make? And we tell them not quite what they expected, it's because of this. So there are patterns that we have that are loose on the waist. Other examples would be like the Montrose. It's a bit, anything that's a bit boxy means that there's going to be a lot of room at the waist. Or something like the Appleton, where it wraps around your body. Well, there's a lot of forgiveness there, right? Because if the wrap instead of there is there, it's going to be totally fine. So if your waist is like 1 inch bigger, so for instance, in the Appleton, I wouldn't make a 20 at the waist. I just make the 18 because I know there's enough wiggle room. Then let's look at the hip. So let's move that one out of the way. So our hip was 62 and the hip here is 65. So not quite as much wiggle room as we have at the waist, but again, a bit. So if you were like 63, I'd be like, it's fine, don't worry about it. You will still fit in this size. Now, the other huge question that we get, I've done this as layers. See, I don't actually do most of our Illustrator work most of the time. So the other huge question that we get, very, very common is, oh, I'm in different sizes. Oh no, right? It doesn't fit me. So let's say you are a 48 bust, and then you're a 24 waist, and then you're a 50 hip, right? Very common. So what you would do is you would first go down and have a look at the sizes that this would suggest to you. Waist, to check, can I get away with it, right? Sorry, I'm doing that the wrong way around. Okay, sorry, ignore me right now. 48, look at the smallest one and now look at the finished garment measurements and say, would I get away with it? Okay, so this would be if you just made a straight 18. So would you fit? So 48, yes, obviously. Your 44 inch waist, well, the waist is 46 and 5/8, so maybe, but maybe it would be better if you added some more room in there because that might be getting it a bit fine. And then in your hip, you have a 50 inch hip. There's a 51 inch hip. I mean, not bad, but again, you might want a bit more. But here's the interesting thing. You might think, well, okay, it's clear. I have to grade from an 18 to a 24 and back to a 20. Not necessarily. That's a really big grade. And if you can keep grading to like only 1 or 2 sizes, you're kind of going to be better off. And what we can see is, and this is where it's an art, right? It's not like a strict science. You would probably be fine with grading up to like a 22 waist, because then you'd get 50 and 5/8 and you're 44. And, you know, that's a lot, that's got a lot of ease. And then, you know, you could stay in the 22 hip, or you could grade back down to a 20 hip. So this is where it gets a little bit, it gets more into like a judgment call, looking at both of the charts and thinking critically about it. Now, in terms of grading between sizes, let me see if I can show you back. Oh, hold on. In terms of grading between sizes, we have an entire section on our website that's all about that. So Let me see if I can do this. Okay, can you see the website again? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the website? Yeah, great. Okay, so you go to About and then down to Grading Between Sizes. Okay, you can also go to cashmerette.com/grading between sizes, also works. We have a very, very extensive guide written by Carrie, not only about the theory of grading between sizes, but also giving examples for every single one of our patterns. Okay, so you're like, how do I grade sizes in the Ipswich? How do I grade between sizes on the Ames? It's all here. So we show you how you pick sizes, and this is like Q&A. So we have categories, right? So let's go to top or dress with the bust dart. So we explain the basics here, what I just explained to you. And this is basically how you do it. So you draw a dot at the waist, the bust, waist, and hip point in the sizes you are, and then you join the dots to make your new pattern. And I would say that this is the single most easy and also like impactful fitting thing you can learn to do when you're a beginner, right? This is a huge difference from ready to wear clothing, because if you're like an 18 and then a 24 and then a 16, forget about finding anything in a shop that fits you. But when you're sewing, it's actually quite easy. So for the bust, when you have a dart, you're starting under the dart. Now remember, the dart's going to be closed, right? So you're basically measuring from the dart, but that's the bottom of the dart. Then in our patterns, we have a notch where the waist and the hip is almost always. So you do your circles there. And then you smoothly draw them together. You don't want a straight line. And having like the styling design ruler, the French curve ruler, is really helpful. As much as possible, you want to copy the curve of the pattern, but sometimes that's not actually reflecting like how your body is. So for instance, if you need to make the waist bigger, the side seam is going to become a straight line because it's meant to go like this and you're moving the waist out. Now it's straight. If you go smaller to bigger, the line might go like this. If you go bigger to smaller, the line might go like this. Once you've done it on the front, and you want it smooth, right? And it's going to cross the other lines. It's not like a step. It's not like 12, 12, 12, 16, 16, 18, right? You're going across sizes. Then you need to translate that to the back. There often isn't a bust marking on the back because it's your back. What you can do is you can measure from the hem up on the front piece, how high is it? And then just do that over onto the back. Yes, so the bust height on the back. So that's the example, for instance, of the Montrose. Let's just show you another example. If you don't have a dart, scrolling down. So this is the Upton. You can see the same thing here. So we have just the bust to the waist. And with the Upton, the bottom of the piece is the waist, right? Because then it's going to go onto the waistband. So then the waistband itself is the biggest size. So here we're going from a 14 bust to a 20 waist. So then the waistband would start at a 20. And usually what's easiest is just to keep that waistband at 20. And then say your hip is a 24, you would start at the top of the skirt at the 20, and then you'd go out to the 24. And so this is the Washington where we're going between the sizes on the yoke. Here's a more significant grade on the Concord. So I'm not going to take you through all of that because there are many, many, many examples on there, but that's the first place to go if you are looking for grading between sizes help. Then I wanted to show you the Concord T-shirt just quickly. So this is the example of negative ease, right? So let's say, again, you have the 28 CD, 56. Why did it go? Now we go down here and you go, woof, look at this. It's 43 3/8. It's going to be so tight. It is not going to be so tight. It's going to be okay and it's going to fit you well. I will say one tip on this is the Pembroke tunic has less negative ease, as in it's a bit bigger at the bust. So if you really don't want something as close fitting as the Concord, you can make a Pembroke and cut it to T-shirt length, and many people have done that. So Then there's the final question is cup size. So this is the one where I have a little bit of news for you guys, which hasn't been formally announced yet. So the little news is we are going to start having high bust measurement on our patterns. Hooray! So we've been asked about this for a long time. It brings some complications, which we're kind of working on through. And so it's not totally ready for prime time yet. Although I say that, I'm actually going to show you, where's the document? This is it. So these are going to be our high bust measurements. We haven't launched them yet. It's going to be a couple of months before we come out. But I didn't want to tell you all about our old style and then you'd be like, oh, now we've got new ones. What's going on? So basically, we use more bra size cup sizing. So there are two types of cup sizing in sewing. Sewing cup sizing and bra cup sizing. We have been using more bra cup sizing, like I'm an H cup, I make a GH. Sewing cup sizing is the difference between upper bust and full bust. So an A is 1 inch, a B is 2 inch, a C is 3 inch, and so on, right? We use bra cup sizing, it's a bit different. All of this is why you should always use your measurements and not your bra size to pick your size. So what you'll do moving forward is this fits me, right? So I'm an 18GH, normally, not the size I just took, right? But normally. So my high bust is 43 and my full bust is 48. So it's a 5-inch difference. And that will let me know that I make a 18GH in the future, okay? You'll see that there's a 48 in the 18 and in the 20. And this is something that confuses people sometimes, right? Right now, as of this current moment, if you're an F cup or bigger, always use the GH, not the CD. Okay, if you're an F cup or bigger, always use the GH or the CD. The difference is between a slightly smaller person with bigger boobs or a slightly bigger person with smaller boobs. You have exactly the same circumference, but you have different proportions, okay? Moving forward, we're making it easier by having the high bust measurement in. One caveat, if you already make a Cashmerette size and it fits you and it doesn't quite line up with this, it doesn't matter, right? Like just keep on making that thing and be happy about it. If you find yourself between sizes, so let's say you're a 48, but maybe you have a 41-inch high bust, there's going to be two options. The one is that you can do an FBA, right? So you could do a 16GH and do a 2-inch FBA. The other option is you could potentially, I would only do this on one size, grade between sizes. So you would do one size to here, and then you would grade at this point out. Now, on normal patterns, that's like a cheater FBA, and I wouldn't recommend it because if they're assuming shaping for a B cup and you're an H, it's not going to work. But we already assume you're an H here, so there's a little bit more, it's more likely to work. But basically, this is what we're moving towards. I'm not going to go into like picking sizes for FBAs right now because it's a very complex topic and totally different. But anyway, moving forward on Cashmerette, this is what we are going to do. Okay, so we just have a few minutes left and I have not been reading the messages. So I'm going to go back and look at. Okay, Helga asks, is the measure in the size column a mean for the size or an upper limit for the size? And that's a good question and one I think about. So it's basically the mean. Okay, so it's the average size we recommend. So plus size sizes go up by 2 inches. So you might be like, if I'm in a 1 inch, like if they go 40, 42 and I'm a 41, do I go up or down? The answer honestly is it depends on the garment. So if it has tons of ease in it, go down because you're going to be fine and look at the finished garment requirements. If it's like the Upton and it has very little ease, I'd go up because you want to give yourself a little bit more room. We're actually working on this right now for the high bust, full bust. So for the high bust, full bust, it actually is going to be, let me think it the right way around. It's going to be a max and we're going to recommend you go up, but that's a whole other thing. I won't get into it too much. So, okay. What if your waist is smallest? I know it will fit in larger size patterns, but my shape is lost in garments. Grading between sizes. Grading between sizes is your best friend. And top tip, I would love to do a survey, but I'm going to guess that over 90% of women have to grade between sizes. People like in workshops will be like, one woman once told me like, I have an impossible body. And it's like, well, first of all, you don't, or you wouldn't be in my workshop. You'd be like just some sludge on the pavement. You're a possible body. But she basically was saying, look, I'm like, I can't even remember now, but let's just say for the sake of argument, she was like a 12, an 18, and a 32. She's like, you can't make things in my size. It's like, yes, you can, right? You can make a wrap dress for a tiny mouse or for an elephant. Anything. You could make anything for anything. It's just fabric. It's just geometry. It's just making stuff, right? So nothing's impossible. What you'd be doing is grading between sizes. Almost everybody has to do it because we are not made in a factory. We're not in a mold where they just splodge out like identically fitting people, right? And this isn't a plus size thing either. Like you could be like incredibly small, but your waist to hip ratio is like an inch different than someone thinks. And then you're like, what's wrong with my body? Nothing is wrong with your body. We're organic. It's like trying to fit like a mold on a flower. You wouldn't be like, well, that's a rubbish flower. It doesn't fit in my mold. You'd just be like, all flowers are different. We're all different. We're snowflakes, right? So if your waist is smaller, you're going to grade between sizes and you're going to go down. Okay. Just having a look. Okay. Shelley asked, what measurement changes you from needing a regular bicep to a full bicep? So the answer is there isn't like one thing I can tell you, right? Like you have to look at the bicep measurement. So we, as of, I don't actually know when off the top of my head, maybe 2 years ago, started putting bicep measurements on our patterns. If there isn't one, it's actually very easy, right? You just measure the bicep on the pattern piece. So really it's about what you want, how much ease you want to have. So most people want like solidly like an inch or two if it's a woven. In a knit, you might be okay with nothing, right? Like, I don't know, I guess there is a bit of ease in this. See, again, I have small biceps for my size, but like, let's just say there wasn't, I might be fine because it stretches. So you have to really look per pattern. We have free bicep, full bicep patterns available for the Harrison, and it's included in the Montrose and in the fuller cardigan as well. It adds 1.5 inches, but you might need more than that, in which case you need to do a full bicep adjustment. Rose said, do you copy your patterns after you grade them? Yeah, so if you're doing any adjustments, including grading between sizes, you don't want to do it on the original pattern, okay? Because you might need to redo it. It's not necessarily like obviously like one and done. So if you're using a paper pattern, you definitely want to trace it because you do not want to have to go out and buy another $18 pattern. With PDFs, some people treat them as like, it's fine. If it doesn't work, I'll reprint it. If you're cool with that, that's fine. But if you're, say, using like a copy shop service, you might not want to because you don't want to spend another like $8 or whatever it is, in which case I would trace it. Okay, Helga said, I find my bust measure in more than one column. What do I choose? Sure. So in the long term, well, midterm, when we come out with high bust measurement, that's what's going to let you choose, right? Because you're going to see where your high bust is and you're going to pick which full bust matches that. For now, until we come out with that, so first of all, if you're bigger than an F, you're always going to pick the GH because the same number is only ever in CD and GH, right? So if you're F cup or bigger, always the GH. Or if you perceive yourself to have like a smaller frame and bigger boobs, GH. If you perceive yourself to have a bigger frame, like wider shoulders, for instance, then you would go in the CD. I will say, although we're based on bra sizes, it's not always perfect, right? You can't just be like, I'm an F cup, I'm going to make an F cup, because cup sizes change between countries. Cup sizes change between bra brands. You might not be wearing the right cup size. I mean, that's actually a silly idea, honestly, like there is no right cup size, but there's so many variations that you just always want to use your actual measurements. So that's the guidance. But you can also always email us at hello@cashmerette.com. Every single day we do like personalized help. Okay, 2 final questions. Is it usual to fit in different cashmerette sizes between woven and knit? Sometimes. It depends if you've been like using it a bit. So what I mean by this is the Turner has a generous waist and it's a knit. So even though your waist might technically be in a, say for me, a 20, I can wear the 18, no problem. but I can't get away with that in the Upton because there's almost no ease, right? So actually I would end up wearing a different size, but it depends on whether you're using those tricks and what you're going from, right? If you're going from woven to knit or you're going from knit to woven. I will say, Heather's saying she had an utter muslin failure. I do have a checklist on the website. If you Google, why doesn't it fit Cashmerette? I have a checklist, and a high percent of the time when someone has a total muslin failure and they're like, I picked the right size, I'm sure, something on that checklist will tell you what happened. It's quite common. There are like PDF issues, measuring issues, bra issues, fabric issues, and it takes you down all of them. And I really recommend, this is if you have something like radically wrong, right? Not like just like, oh, it's a bit tight here, but you're like, this is a tent. Like, I don't think people are wearing tents in Cashmerette. What's going on? That's where you can do it. Carrie has added the link in the chat, so you can just go straight over there. And then the final question is, are you planning any more pants patterns like a trouser or wide leg? The answer is yes, very soon, you will be seeing a pants pattern that is woven, extremely soon, in fact. Ayala is working on it as we speak. So yeah, we're excited to come out with that. You know, it's a bit weird launching something with what's going on in the world right now, but we figured, you know what, we want distraction. I'm guessing that you want distraction. It's something for us all to do. Also, I want to keep Cashmerette going. Oh, it's so funny. I just realized that you can actually see the sample on the ironing board behind me there. That's my leopard version. Okay, so we are wrapping up now. My daughter's going to wake up screaming any second. So I hope you had a fun time. This is going to be available to rewatch on Facebook, I think, if any of you are so enthusiastic that you want to watch me doing this again. If you have any other questions, you can email us, hello@cashmerette.com. You can ask questions in our Facebook community group, which is a private group. You apply to be in it. We accept it as long as you answer the questions. That's really helpful. And if you have any requests for what we could do future topics on within the sort of boundaries of what I can do in my house, then do let me know. I think FBA sounds like it would be one people are interested in, but there's all kinds of other topics that might be good for this format. And yeah, we're going to keep on doing them as long as I'm stuck in the house. And we've just been told daycare is closed for another 6 weeks at least. So there's at least another 6 of these happening, and maybe we'll continue. We'll see if people like them. So anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and have a nice rest of the day. Bye.